Perfect. Hey, Doug, welcome to the Mental Health Warriors podcast.
And it was perfect until you pressed record, and now it's choppy.
Oh, is it really?
Now we're good.
Oh, okay. Well, here, why don't we try that again? I can edit that out. Doug, welcome to the Mental Health Warriors podcast.
Hey, Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. You know, we fought through some technical issues here, but we're online and live. So that's, I'm looking forward to having this conversation. So I guess the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is what made you write your book, Driven? So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you came to the point where you felt it was necessary. The world needed this book.
Yeah, the world does need this book. I needed to write this book, more importantly. But how far back should I go? So, born and raised in a suburb of LA, and very affluent family. Didn't start out that way, but my dad was he's a German Jew. And so it was all about looking good on the outside and hiding on the inside. So about 14, 15 years old, I started to realize how really different I felt. Older brother was perfect, and I kind of went the other way and went to, by chance, went to London, England, and went to Trafalgar Square. It was 1981, and saw a whole bunch of punks. And it was the height of the punk rock movement. So I said, that's what will really get me attention from my family. So between 13 and 15, 16, I went on a path of pretty much complete self-destruction. Wound up living in a car in streets of Hollywood and dropping out of high school at 16. And it was before the whole ADD, ADHD wave of popularity. So I had no idea. I thought I was broken, and I knew I was just really pissed off. So at 17, 18, I started to realize it's actually my crowning moment. I was sleeping in the back of this car, and this, God, she looked like Mrs. Roper from Three's Company, came banging on the back window. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and hey, you can't sleep here. And in that moment, I had my first real aha wake-up call of, I saw reflected back in her eyes disgust. And I knew I wasn't disgusting. I knew there was something like, how the hell did I get here? So pretty quickly, within about 2 weeks or 3 weeks of that, I was in a locked mental ward, for about 11 days, and then realized that I wasn't really crazy either. And from there, I went into basically recovery, and this was mid-'80s, so it was before the whole wave of throw every kid into rehab and everything else. But and then the intervening 30 years, it's been just an amazing time to be a psychologist. Went back to school and got way overeducated, and then wound up really getting into a whole bunch of different fields. And in 1991, they found, oh my God, we found the alcoholism gene, and that was the start of it. I was working in drug rehabs and started this understanding that maybe I was supposed to be the way I am. And that set into course, just a passion for a whole bunch of different things. But cultural anthropology is one of them, and genetics is another one. And the whole time feeling like there was something still wrong or missing, from my inner sense of self, just felt like I was broken. And so I got into basically self-psychology, really understanding what is this self? What am I? And from there, I got into meditation and the functional MRI, and then even more genetics. And it kind of wound up into this, 30 years of really understanding what the hell went wrong with me. And in that time, I found a kind of a passion for people that are just like me, and kind of put it all together in that book.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I can just I just try to imagine like how many kids are mislabeled, because we have this, I guess, as maybe from an anthropological point of view. Why do you think it is that we want to label people who don't conform as having some type of problem? Like, how does that serve people by doing that?
Yeah. So my dissertation was self-sabotage, self-fulfilling prophecy. So I obviously got into the sense of self, but anything that is too unfamiliar to us, even personally or, socially, we just don't like. It scares us. And so the unfamiliar is the scary. And, if it's unfamiliar and out of the norm, it's just, there must be something wrong with you because I am normal. And so it's really, we love to scapegoat people to make us feel like we're okay. And it's kind of a global issue. I mean, that's why there's wars. And it is a deep internal need to feel like we're okay. And so if you're not okay, that makes me even more okay. And it fuels everything. And so these, poor kids, and my youngest daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, is probably driven, and I'll get into the book about what that means, but to see that she has different abilities to sit in a chair and learn differently, and she thinks school is ridiculous, doesn't make her broken. And school was designed by a whole bunch of people trying to figure out how to make better assembly line workers. And my daughter is not going to be an assembly line worker, so it doesn't make her broken. And that is a key component of what I truly believe. And kind of my mission on this planet is to just let everybody feel like, whatever they are, they're normal. They're normal for themselves. And if somebody else is really different, you don't need to pathologize or make them feel broken to make yourself feel better.
Yeah, that is so important. Yeah, it's funny. My older daughter's in grade 9, and she is, I would say, she has zero interest in doing anything other than following a traditional path, where my younger daughter is like, I pray she doesn't even want to go to high school, so I'm trying to not talk her out of it, but you know what I mean? Let her know that there's a world of options available to her. So it's interesting. You mentioned, this idea of being uncomfortable with people or differences. And you mentioned wars. And one of the things that's always been fascinating to me is this idea of like tribalism and nationalism. So do you feel like that's part of the same sort of phenomena? It just drives me crazy when I think of people, like, just by virtue of what postal code or zip code you happen to be born in somehow makes you better than somebody who's born somewhere else.
Well, that has been my passion. And Sebastian Unger and his book Tribe, there's so much good stuff coming out now about it. But the human animal, we're designed to live in groups of 100 to 120 people. And you look at the tribal nature of us, Native American Indians or even kibbutzes, to where once they hit about 100 people, the us and them phenomenon just starts. And when that starts, it just we're just a bunch of animals. And for us to live in these giant social groups is all brand new. We've been on the planet 120,000 years, and it's all only in the last 3,000 that they really become greater than a couple thousand. 10,000 people was a giant city. Now we have millions. It's just our genetics are not designed for this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I won't let this devolve into politics, but it always makes me laugh when people say, we have this idea, we got this guy on top of a country of 350 million people, and they're like, we all got to work together. Fuck off. That's never going to happen, right? So back to the book. I mean, you have this idea or this concept of people, like about 10% of the population are what you call driven. So what are the characteristics that make up those types of people?
Well, it's building off a theory that I'll actually give credit to Tom Hartman, who wrote a book in the early 90s that, his kid was ADD, ADHD, and he was just saying it can't be, something that is just an aberration. It has to be, there's an explanation for it. And so he starts putting it together with the cultural anthropology that, the agricultural revolution of 4,000, 5,000 years ago changed the environmental demands on the human species so much and so rapidly that prior to this, and he even speculates that, looking at the global weather patterns, most of our existence, every 800 to 1,200 years, we had an ice age. So these, the world was a really shitty, hard place to live in most of our existence. And then farming comes along, and we're, have to adapt to this boring, sedentary, sit on your ass and watch stuff grow world. And we're just not wired for that. But, the neocortex, or the new brain, can learn to adapt. And so his theory, and I built on that and looked at all the genetics and looked at the functional MRI data, around, does his theory really hold water that 90% of the human population adapted to being lazy, basically? And then the 10% of us that, remain in these hunter genetics, these really strong, easily bored, always feeling like there's a grass is greener on the other side of the hill. And, does that really hold water? And the answer is profoundly yes. We are different. And, these hunter versus farmer genetics, and it just, he received just a tremendous amount of criticism for it. It's pop psychology, and most of the criticism came from the med companies and from psychiatrists that were saying, well, let's keep this population broken so we can give them meds. And he was trying to, normalize all that. And I built on that, and just, being driven means, that we're just wired for a scarier world. And, the last 10 years, last 10 years, I've been into trauma healing. And very amazing time to be a psychologist, because this, two different operating systems that we have to make it through this weird experience of life. We have one that's very genetically driven, reptilian, and the deeper animal in us is designed, for, if you're driven, for a very scary world. And so managing that scary world in our new brain, we have all kinds of behaviors, OCD and impulsivity and addictions. And the interesting component of that is that, does trauma really turn on and off these genetics? And, the answer to that, and all my research of that, is yes. You look at Holocaust survivors, you can predict with unbelievable accuracy, just on blood samples, who has a, extremely traumatized, multi-generation kind of pattern going. And they can trace it back 4 or 5 generations now of who was in, whose great grandparents were in the Holocaust and not. And so it's just, we're an adaptive animal. And if your grandparents were in a scary world, you will, more than likely have these genetics that are designed to live in this, very scary world.
Man, that is so interesting, because we've had, in our mental health warriors community, we actually had a conversation, quite a heated dialogue going on about this. I did a podcast with a guy, kind of a social justice warrior kind of guy, but regardless, we were talking about racism, and we were talking about the effects of intergenerational trauma. And I had never, I'll be honest with you, it sounded like bullshit to me. I'd never even heard of it. So, and then we had some psychotherapists in the group basically saying the same thing, that there is no such thing as intergenerational trauma. But it sounds like you believe otherwise, and I think that's very, very interesting.
Well, it's just, I have actually way overeducated. I have 2 PhDs, and the statistically, it just doesn't lie, and is the epigenetics of nature versus nurture controversy is basically put to rest. And, if you're in the psych literature and really looking at it, anybody who's trying to make a claim of nature versus nurture doesn't hold water. Because our, good news is that even if your grandparents had tremendous trauma in their life, you can change your genetics. Mm-hmm. And so, is it nature versus nurture? The answer is always yes. You cannot separate them anymore. And that's what trauma healing is about. And so, I was raised based on my grandparents, to live in this horrific world. But, most of our existence on this planet, our feet were our primary transportation. And so our world, our genetics aren't designed to adapt rapidly. Because if we're born into a terrible world, chances are we were going to stay in that world, because it's hard to run away more than a couple 100 miles. But now it's, in the last 50 years, we can completely change our environments. Good news is that if you get out of the way of your body will adapt incredibly fast. And I say that all the time to all my clients. Human beings are in a constant state of change, working their asses off at staying the same. And, if you start to become much more curious about, does my central nervous system actually match what is happening in the real world around me? Most of the time, the answer is no. And we're wired, as a driven person, I'm wired to see snakes everywhere. And that was my doctoral research, that if you're wired to see a snake, you'll see them and you'll attend to them and believe them. But if you start to become curious or mindful that, is it a snake or is it a stick? My central nervous system is telling me, holy crap, that's scary. Take a breath, and then is it? And that questioning of is it, the body will start to adapt almost immediately. It's incredible how quickly we can adapt to a safer world.
That's something I've become, really fascinated by lately is the idea. I don't know. I've heard it called like our brain's expectation mechanism. I'm assuming you might think it's described it in a different way, but I always tell this story where I used to have this pathological fear of dogs. I don't even know really where it came from. I'm like, fuck, we'd walk around with my wife, and my wife is of course like the dog whisperer. So it was like this complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But I would literally like actually see vicious dogs everywhere. I mean, we'd go for a walk in the evening, and in our nice little neighborhood here, there'd be like, I see hellhounds everywhere I look. And then we got a dog, and she taught me basically, how dogs behave, and when they do this is what they mean, and they're not really blah, blah, blah. And so I got over my fear of dogs, and I don't see them anywhere anymore.
Yeah, and I go into that in depth in my book, and I promise my wife not to name brain parts or the F-bomb on any of these podcasts. So it's actually called, and I'll break one of the rules, reticular activating system. And I go into it a little bit in the book, and I pulled so much neurobiology psychobabble out of the book as I could. But it's just, we have this invisible radar mechanism in our brain. It's a limbic cluster attaching to the body. It's the unconscious or subconscious, and it's not a mystery. It's right below your nose. It's your body. And so when that pattern is matched, in the pattern of dog is matched, you have a physiological response of threat. And, it's the classic, and I use it in my book, is, we are hardwired that when we touch a hot stove and recoil away from it, reflexively pull our muscles back, all of that information is actually hardwired into our DNA and in the nerve pathways and the cell pathways and then in the muscles. Then the limbic cluster creates this pattern of square metal box with 4 burners. And it can be a 1950s retro or a glass top modern, but when you walk in the kitchen, the activating system will actually ping this radar as a potential threat. And the magic starts to happen when your new brain or the neocortex can actually question that, because you will have that reaction in your body whether the stove is on or not. And, yes, it's a stove, and yes, it potentially can hurt me, but right now it's off and not hot. So it's that in-between phase that allows us to actually start to, reality test. And your reality testing of a dog is, many dogs are threats, many dogs aren't. And it's that in between. But the way we're wired is that if the pattern is close enough, we just react and assume or expect, the expectancy machine, as you say, yeah, it's a threat. And as the animal that we are, it's easier to, always, assume everything is a threat. And if you're driven, you're really wired for that. And it's kept us alive, kept us here for 120,000 years. But its usefulness is, it's not I'm sure the people that say, oh my God, you're genetically this way, therefore it's your life is cast upon this. That's I agree with you. That's bullshit, because it's the capacity to actually rewire the body or rewire this software program running in your head, that you're not just going to, everything's scary. And it's things are scary in this world. There are real snakes. There are dogs that'll bite you. So it's not that you're getting rid of that program. You're just able to actually see reality through it. And
so is that's a concept what you call perceptive biases? Is that right in the book?
Yeah, and it's a feedback loop, and that was my doctoral dissertation. That human beings, we're not looking for a safer, better world below our nose. The limbic cluster in the reptilian brain is looking for a familiar world. And if a dog is scary, and you keep this expectation or this perception that all dogs are scary, when you approach a dog, you're going to be guarded and stiff and anticipatory kind of reactions. The dog's going to see that, feel that, and growl at you. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or self-fulfilling bias. and I won't throw Buddha babble out there either, but it's, that's simply what they mean by karma.
Mm.
That your unknown karma simply means actions, that your actions are actually creating your world. And, if you approach every dog, is it scary? Every dog will be scary. And so it's a, feedback loop in our brain. And then you have this confirmation bias that you expected it, it was confirmed. And then that pattern just gets burned in deeper and deeper and deeper. And it unlocking that is really what the book's about. And that's, I present a very different style of meditation in the book that, meditation is not about relaxation. It's about reality testing. And, right now sitting here on this cushion, I'm not in danger, and yet I'm judging myself about my breathing or whatever I'm doing, trying to keep my central nervous system feeling, familiarly uncomfortable.
What I like about the book is that you explain like those concepts of karma, or that, our beliefs create our reality. I've never heard it explained in like the actual science behind it, like logically or in some way. I know that to be true because I've seen it in my own life, but it was really fascinating to read that it's actually true. It's not actually psychobabble, or not psychobabble, but you know what I mean? New age mysticism, or whatever you want to call it. So I found that really fascinating and actually empowering, right? Because there is a rationale to it, I guess, or there is science behind it, but also that we can change it.
Yeah, and that's the piece that realizing that most people are creating their own worlds, and I am a licensed psychologist, and very, very strong bias in psychology, to not blame the victim, and I agree with that, but it's if you're creating your own world, there are no victims. And I get a lot of pushback about that. So what you're saying is it's everybody's fault? No, it's the opposite. And the Buddha said, the wheel of suffering starts with ignorance. And what are we actually ignoring is, the reality that how much control or how much power we have over changing our lives.
Wow. So you talk also about this is I feel like this is part conversation, part therapy session for me. So, so one of the good things about the podcast is, you sent me some books and I get to talk to you, and hopefully you don't invoice me. So you talk about the idea of the elephant, is it elephant brain or monkey brain, or that you're both and not, and what I'm having maybe you can talk about that, but what I struggle with is this concept of simultaneously being both and neither. Or neither, you know what I mean?
Got it. All right. So yeah, I take people, it's it's a very simple concept. And my father, 82-year-old neurosurgeon, ENT neurosurgeon, guy looked at me and goes, "No, that's a really simple concept, but damn, that's deep." Like, whoa. Because the Buddha was not a Christ figure or a Messiah figure or anything else. He was just a wacko psychologist. But what he noticed is that most people are very much like an Indian elephant being trained by a whole bunch of monkeys up on top. And the monkeys have these little sticks, and they're, beating the elephant and really trying to, control the elephant. And that goes into the two different operating systems that we have. We have this very, very old reptilian, deep mammalian brain that is our unconscious. And it oftentimes seems to have a mind of its own. And so this lumbering kind of elephant below our nose is really in control of our life. And, most psychologists and most people go, no. And my doctoral research was all about, why do people, why does January suck so bad at the gym? Because everybody's monkey mind has got, you may have a couple of gorillas up there, you may have a couple of nice monkeys, petting the elephant and just convincing it to go to the gym. And this time it's going to be different than everything else. But come February, come March, come April, the elephant's resistance to change starts to become greater and greater and greater. I become unfamiliarly fit, I become feeling too good. And so the resistance of the elephant just to get out the door, then you'll have monkeys up on top either getting meaner at you and beating you harder, or another couple that are up there, rationalizing you'll do it tomorrow. And the classic Buddha question then is, which one are you? Are you the monkeys or are you the elephant? And, as you alluded to before, that's a trick question because the answer is both and neither. And the neither piece allows you to actually be, they call it the observing ego, or Eckhart Tolle pop philosophy and all that is the observer, to where you can observe, the 35 different or 300 different monkeys you have up in your head, then also feel the impulsive resistant elephant. And, be neither, and neither gives you this space of freedom from them. You can feel that resistance to going to the gym and then hear the 13 different monkeys. But the, consciousness, and that's really what I'm talking about, and all the hippie BS about, expanding your consciousness, and that's what they're talking about, is this ability to actually meet both the monkey mind, that's chattering and arguing with the elephant, and feel the elephant's resistance and the elephant's. And so in that neither space, and the key takeaways, a couple key takeaways I have in the book, one of which is in the present moment, there is no resistance. And that is, you go, wait a minute, because, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to feel what it's like to be on that damn treadmill again. But none of that's happening right now. And so it's in that space of where you can curiously, what am I feeling right now? Is just my ass on the couch. And, the monkey mind then, which is a basic problem solver, there is no problem to solve right now. And so the monkey mind can also shut up. And then if you notice very consciously what it feels like to stand up and go put on your gym clothes and then walk to the car and then walk to the gym or get into the gym, the resistance becomes manageable. And, one of my passion things is flow and flow hacking. And, what is this ultimate experience where the monkey mind, the conscious observer, and the elephant all fall away into one cohesive experience? And that's the addiction of video games, or, driving fast, or downhill skiing, or any of these yoga practices. And yoga simply means to yoke, and yoking is something you put on a yoke is something you put on a bull's neck to pull a plow. And so what it's doing is yoking all three of those things together. And it holds it into this, and that falls away. And, and if you're driven, if you're really wired as a hunter, we love that experience. I mean, that is what we are wired for. And anything that does that for us, we often can become addicted to it. And, I talk about those flow states of, ultimate performance. And, that is what I hack into. And, I work with a bunch of PGA pros, and I work with, really elite entrepreneurs, and, that mysterious flow. How do I get into it? How do I not? Well, it's that ability to first be in the observer, hear the monkey mind, and feel the elephant's resistance. And then as that becomes more and more present, eventually it'll snap into one thing. And it's freedom from all three, because it's our inner world is not real, so to speak. And when the inner world and the outer world match, and there is no separation between all of these different parts of me and the outer world, it's just a blissful, amazing experience. And that's where ultimate performance comes from.
So I had an experience that I think, listening to what you just said, I had this experience, and I think I have more clarity on how limiting the way I approach this is. And it's how I approach a lot of things. So I had a friend that passed away. She was killed in a car crash about a month ago. And I went to her memorial service, and I came home and I was really frazzled. Like I was really feeling, so I was telling my wife, like I feel like ungrounded somehow, although I don't even know what that means. That's the word that's coming to mind to describe how I feel. And I'm laying in bed, and I'm actually stressing myself out even more, because this is what the thought process is going through my head is, okay, this is what I was saying to my wife. I feel like, as part of me wants to feel these feelings, and really immerse myself in this experience. And then part of me feels like the the more elevated person would be able to like just observe this stuff that's happening to me. And like but I felt like I had to make a choice, like they were an either or proposition.
Yep.
And I think what you're saying is that it's neither. Like I didn't have to choose either one of those things. Is that right?
So that is the monkey mind and the elephant. So the elephant is sending up signals into your monkey mind and waking up all these different monkeys. And, the monkey mind is basically a judging machine, trying to discern right from wrong. And a classic Zen story that I always tell is maybe. And this differentiation, and Carl Jung is the other one I'm really passionate about. He was 50 years, 80 years before his time. And what he talked about was the bifurcation or the split of our right and wrong, and this how we try to split ourselves up. And the maybe story is so a guy's got a horse that he uses to plow his fields. The horse runs away one day, and all of his neighbors come running up and oh, that's so sad, so sad. And maybe. The next day, the horse comes back with 2 other wild horses. Oh, you're so lucky, and now you have 3 horses. And maybe. The next day, his son gets on one of the horses, wild horses, trying to break it. He gets thrown and breaks his leg. And, oh, that's terrible, terrible, terrible. And the guy says, maybe. Then the next day, he's sitting there with a broken leg, and all of the military comes up drafting all the young men. Oh, you're so lucky, that your son can't go and fight, maybe. But this, is it a good thing or a bad thing that you're grieving the loss of your friend? And I'm sorry for your loss. And it's maybe, and it is both. And, I get this gets really deep philosophy very quick, but, and I say it and I'll knock on wood, that, I could pick my phone up at any moment of the day and my wife and kids are dead. And, that would be a horrifically painful experience. But why would it hurt? Because I love them. And the more I can experience that potential hurt, the more grateful I can be for having them. And so losing them and having pain and, is directly, and pain is love, is basically what and so that ability to actually get emotionally intelligent about what is happening in my body and why is this pain there allows me to fully experience the pain, which, basically builds a full life. Fear of them dying in a car crash. If I let that, I'm so scared that it's going to hurt. And that feedback loop, and oh my God, I have to become obsessive about it. And, eventually they're in a school bus buried in the backyard because I do not want them to ever leave me. And so being able to actually engage the pain in the elephant without the monkey mind driving the fear of that pain. And so that's where this split really starts to take on power, to where I can drop into my body and, you can fully experience the pain of the loss of your friend because you loved her. And, that is where the trauma healing starts to happen, because then it takes on, it gets real hippie real quick, but the alchemy of it, the lead in the body of that hurt is actually gold. And you're not trying to get rid of that hurt. You're actually embracing that hurt because that hurt symbolizes how much you cared for her. Fear is the animal that we gotta get. Fear is the monster that we gotta really embrace. But fear does not, and burn this into your brain somewhere, fear does not exist in the present moment. There is no such thing as fear. Fear only exists, and I do this with all the Navy SEAL guys I've worked with. Fear is a sign that the present moment is actually safe. And it's kind of jarring to the brain, but that's really the core of meditation. And that's why meditation becomes a spiritual, not a religious, but a spiritual practice, that right now in this present moment, how safe can I feel? And 2 seconds from now, 3 seconds from now, 5 seconds from now, a meteorite could hit you right on the head and you're dead, but it's not happening right now. And, the biology of that, the body will actually, there's a lot of, and that's the old Buddha saying, you know, pain is part of life, but pain is love. Fear, and you know, fear plus pain is suffering. Suffering is optional. And so it's fear is really the passion in my life that I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to change the world in. And fear is truly optional, incredibly necessary. I mean, you know, you don't pay your mortgage, they take your stuff away. That's not good. It's a useful, incredibly useful tool, but pain plus fear equals suffering, and that's where, you know, the monkey mind and the body holds the pain, the fear is up in the monkeys. And where you can actually just allow your body to feel the pain, it'll transform itself into incredible great gratitude that you had a friend that you could lose.
You know, you just said, wow, that was really powerful, because I'm thinking as you're talking about my wife, for example, one of the things that has happened is that as time has passed and I have changed as a person and allowed myself, like I spent a long time just, you know, being too afraid, or not, I don't think so, like consciously, but being afraid to feel the pain.
Right.
And, you know, trying to drink it all away and all that kind of stuff. And, but what I've started saying lately, and I'm just, now that you're talking, I'm thinking it's horseshit, is that I am trying to reconcile this idea that perhaps the world has become a better place as a result of her loss, because I have changed so much that I am making a more powerful contribution. But I guess, and so then I'm trying to reconcile these two ideas, but really it's just maybe. Like, maybe it's a better place, maybe it isn't, you know, I don't know that.
And that freedom that you start to feel from that is what I just get off on teaching people this stuff, because it's, you know, I lived in a car. I mean, I know what it is. I know, I've been to hell. Completely alone, no one understanding me, feeling, you know, and that a big part of my book is really about shame. And, you know, driven people, these two primary genetics are in our reward system, you know, the dopamine receptor number 2 and dopamine receptor number 4 make us feel like there's something, you know, dopamine receptor number 2 is really about this sense of boredom. And what is boredom is you're sitting there in front of the TV and something in the elephant starts to feel wonky, and it hits your monkey mind and you try to solve that problem. And eventually, you know, there's something wonky or wrong with me. And so why do I always feel this way? And if we're using that emotional evidence as proof that I'm broken or wrong, and then we have a society and a psychiatry community that loves to make us feel bad and broken because we don't fit in, man, it's hell. And, you know, that shame piece of actually getting out of that I'm a hunter. I'm wired different. It's a massive gift. I'm wired to feel more fear than most people. And, you know, I'm also wired to feel like everything couldn't be better. Everything can always be better. And that's always the truth. Another way of saying that is everything's always screwed up. Mm-hmm. And same continuum, you can't have a screw up without better. And so it's a mindset shift. And, you know, I'm in hurt and I'm feeling pain right now, which is not a bad thing. You know, maybe either way. Fear then takes on a very different feeling. It's a gift, because it forces me to actually optimize every area of my life. You know, and the guys I work with, man, I watch, once you get unhooked from fear and your expectancy starts to drop away, or at least you start to catch it, you feel this incredible freedom, you know, and that I can feel pain and I don't have to escape from my fear, because I'm able to feel safe in the present moment and then look at, you know, potential snakes and sticks and really see how I can change them and morph them into, you know, either by my expectancy. And I'm not a hippie by any means, but, you know, I think the neurobiology of it it's an amazing time to be alive and watch this stuff unfold.
Wow. So in the book you talk about, another concept I found really fascinating was the difference between asking the question, who am I versus what am I? So can you talk about that a bit? Because I found that really interesting.
Yeah. And so Um, to study Zen is to study the self. And what is this sense of self? And I actually had a client that committed suicide about 4 months ago. Very rare, actually, for me to have somebody commit suicide, but not that rare to have somebody walk into my office and say they want to kill themselves. And, my typical response, and I'm more careful with it now these days than not, but, is fantastic. Let me show you how. Because what is the self? Who am I? And, the classic, question of why are you on this planet? The only truth is somewhere in your history, two people had sex. That is what you're doing here. Above and beyond that is all this narrative. And so this sense of who is, it's a complete aberration of our brain and our bodies. And, this monkey elephant, split between us. We love to have this sense of, there is a me traveling through space and time, but it's ridiculous. So I present a logical argument, but if that's gone, what replaces it is literally, what you're doing right now. And, what I'm doing right now is teaching on a podcast, and that's what I am. I'm an animal, I'm driven, and I'm teaching. And I can always do, teaching better. And so I'm freed then, and that's the profound real freedom of it. When you get this very simple concept, it frees me from the results. Because, what I'm doing is teaching, and that is my embodied emotional intention of really trying to be a good teacher. And a good teacher doesn't know they're a good teacher because they're always trying to be a better teacher. A good dad doesn't know they're a good dad because they're always trying to be a better dad. And then, I screwed that up. Maybe, how can I do it better? Mm-hmm. And that, for a driven hunter person like myself, that is the mastery path. And that is where I just start to launch. Because everything, I'm not trying to avoid my mistakes or avoid, the pain of just being alive, nor am I scared of screwing up, because I want to see my screw up so I can, make myself a better human being. But that concept of what I am is there is no who, because that only comes from judgment, and that's the judging monkey mind trying to make sense of this weird experience.
So in that case, how is defining ourselves as driven, what versus who? You know what I mean? Are we really driven, or are we really just nothing more than human beings here in this moment? I think I just fucking blew my own mind there. So
exactly, yeah. Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay. I figured you were going to say that.
No, and I try not to sound like a Zen wacko as much as I can, but it's what I am is what I am. Mm-hmm. You cannot deny that I'm an animal. And you put us in a functional MRI, and I coin it driven, or you call it a hunter, you call it, just me. But there is no one fixed thing that I am here, that's really different than anyone else, but I'm not the same as anyone else at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so, there's almost 8 billion central nervous systems on the planet, and no two are the same. We're just an incredible machine animal. And so being driven is really an understanding of these tendencies that we have to not fit into this farmer's world. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in. And it's the running joke that I tell all my entrepreneurs is basically we're unemployable, because it's really hard for us to have a boss. It's very difficult for driven people just to take direction from somebody else, particularly a farmer that's telling us how to do things, when our brain, and I won't get into it now, but I get into it in the book, is how we're designed to live in a very fluid, always changing world, where the farmers are designed to, do the same thing over and over and over. This is the way we grew crops last year, and this is the way it keeps us safe, so let's don't change anything. We're hunters, man. We are a fluid, changing, if we can optimize it and make it better, we will. And so that drivenness actually gives you permission to really understand yourself in a different way and not, try to become a farmer. And that is the core of what, helped set me free and all the guys I work with and women I work with that were different. And why does your resume look like you have a different job every 18 months? It's just the way I work. It is I get hyper focused on one thing, kind of figure it out, and then I'm going to jump to something else because it's, I'm a mastery of my environment as a hunter. Where farmers are, if they did it this way, they'll keep the same job for 30 years. Where if I'm sitting in a cubicle for more than 6 hours, I'm losing my mind.
Man, I feel so liberated because I look at my resume, man. It's like a friggin', I don't know. It's funny. So but I do the exact same thing. I go but everything, it's like the squirrel syndrome. Everything interests me, right? It's either, and I get all hyper focused on it, and then I lose interest, and I move on to something else. And what's interesting is I probably have achieved a certain level of mastery over a lot of the things I'm interested in, but I tell myself that I feel like retarded half the time. I feel like I've achieved mastery over nothing. Sometimes I'm able to step back and say, logically assess it or somewhat objectively assess it or something and say, yeah, okay, you know what? I'm actually kind of performing at a high level here and a high level here. But most of the time I just feel like I'm failing at everything.
That is exactly. And the farmers and the guy who, one of the core researchers that really these genetics calls it reward deficiency syndrome. And so these dopamine receptor sites, no matter what we do, we never get that real pop of dopamine. And so it doesn't feel like well, it's true. We always could have done better. And I thought I'd get in good shape and wound up doing a whole bunch of Ironmans and, crazy, insane exercise. And it was an amazing experience, running through the finish line of an Ironman. You take about 10 steps and then you take a breath and then you turn around and look at the time. At the moment you see the time, it's like just the way our brains work. It's a massive gift, and you hear me laughing about it, but you're scrolling through the day then of how I could have improved. And that is an incredible gift. And that gift of, how could I have improved this rather than, oh shit. It's like, well, wait a minute, next time. And that maybe story frees you from that of, how do I optimize it? But, there's always somebody better. And, you start to look at your life and, from this what perspective, I'm able to step back and, from a farmer's perspective, with Ironmans and 2 PhDs and, a wife and kids and house and cars and travel and vacation and, damn, dude, you're living a baller life. And I look at my life and go, well, there's all these areas that I need to improve. And I had a piece of pumpkin pie yesterday. So, maybe, but it's just the way. That is a gift, not a curse. As long as I'm able to actually hold this driven identity and just, that's just what I am. And, the reality of, money and, we as driven people tend to be incredibly sabotaging because we optimize one area of our life. We, let the other areas of our life fall away until all of a sudden this other area, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to sign up for an Ironman, 30 hours of exercise, and my wife's pissed. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I get into that towards the end of the book of really finding balance in our life. And I'll say it again and again and again, balance is bullshit. You'll never have balance, but knowing you're out of balance in other areas allows you to actually move through life in this, kind of conscious way of attempting to find balance. And, we have to move them all together. Friends, family, fitness, finance, fun, and finding that balance point will never happen. It's 10 seconds a year in my world. And those 10 seconds are not all together. It's 2 seconds here and a second there and 3 seconds here because I'm jumping to something else and trying to optimize it.
Yeah. It just reminded me of a story a couple of years ago. I was riding my bike. I went for a bike ride And, it's like middle of summer, 90 degrees, and I rode my bike 150 miles, and I got like 5 miles from home, and I physically could no longer turn my legs. So I had to do the unthinkable and call my wife to pick me up. And the first thing, I throw my bike in the car. I'm furious with myself, and first thing I say is, "I'm a quitter." You know, she's like, "You're an idiot," is what you are. But
No, the imposter syndrome, which
oh
is
yeah,
what we're famous for as drivens, is because no one knows the deeper flawed, me that really is trying to, fake it through life because I never feel like I'm good enough. Walking out of my doctoral dissertation defense, with 2 PhDs and, my monkey mind, I heard it clear as a bell. Haha, they bought it. They bought this, I faked it. But, number one is I caught the monkey mind. I didn't believe my own narrative. And two, I actually felt some reward in my body because it was good enough, and good enough to get the thing on my wall, good enough for me to move on to the next thing. But good enough and always better is just a massive gift. And if you can embrace that, that's what we are. And I start to feel sorry for farmers because farmers they're settling for this simple, small little life that they have, where I'm never going to settle. I'm never going to settle. And
So we talked a lot about being driven, and some of the, let's call it, side effects of being driven. But what are some of the structures, or I guess strategies, that driven people can put into place to maximize or optimize their effectiveness?
Yeah, and that's what has allowed me to actually harness this whole gift is meditation. And it's not, if you're hating of meditation, ever tried meditation, most meditations are developed and designed by farmers for farmers. And they don't really work for us. They don't. And they actually make us worse. They make us feel crazy. And because it's just too much. Yeah, exactly.
Been there. Yeah, absolutely.
So the style of meditation that I teach is very much based in a Japanese eyes open, and it's about presenting, actually noticing how you breathe in a very specific way, just sitting down, looking around, and really orienting to what's happening around you. Your body, then, the elephant, will naturally, as a byproduct of becoming present, calm down. And where I get everybody started is 30-second, 1 minute, 5 breath, whatever meditation practice, somewhere, between going pee first thing, a cup of coffee, and then before you get out the door. The whole point of that, putting this very simple, no logical reason whatsoever not to meditate for 1 minute in the morning. The monkey mind cannot talk you out of it. And I've got MD, PhDs, brilliant guys that are, staring at the meditation cushion for 10, 15 minutes, feeling the resistance in the elephant, unable to go do their 1 minute. And it's that, but there's no resistance in the present. And so you feel the resistance to go do this stupid, simple 1 minute meditation, and you're building the neurological connections of flow. And that is a massive, and meaning that the monkey mind, you're not believing the narrative why it's ridiculous to go meditate for a minute or how you're going to do it later, nor are you, submitting to the resistance in the elephant. And if you start to become present, you'll feel that resistance melt away. And, all the guys I work with, what would your life look like if you actually had no resistance to calling people back on a sales call, or walking into a job interview, or, walking through the door 20 minutes late to your wife, and not feeling all of that resistance, because resistance is fear. And so you're directly hacking into the monkey elephant split that connects us to reality check fear. And once I get guys in that biological patterning of, really rewiring the body out of fear, and it's 3, 4, 5 months, your fear will go out of your life. It's a trip. And then you're just not scared anymore. You're meeting maybe, maybe it's a bad thing that I'm late. Maybe it's a bad thing my wife is pissed that I'm 20 minutes late. And is it really that she's pissed, or was she scared that that something bad happened to me? It's wonderful that she was scared something bad happened to me, because it means she cares. And so your emotional intelligence starts to go through the friggin' roof, and you're unhooked from your fear. And once that happens, man, your life will launch in a way you can't believe.
Wow. You just kind of described me trying to meditate, which is really, really interesting. And I'm totally going to put your techniques into practice, because the way I look at meditating is I never do it good enough, first of all. Right. And I sit there and I go, God, like this, think of the opportunity cost of meditating. What could I have been doing for this 20 minutes? Like, God, what have I? So, I mean, all these thoughts are going through my head the entire time I'm trying to listen to some guy tell me that I should focus on a, point of light or whatever,
Oh yeah, no, it's those farmer meditations make me sick. Actually, I just can't. They're not designed for us, and that's one of the things in my book that I talk about. I came up with one of the best ways to teach meditation is long range shooting, and I get guys behind a gun, and the elephant is naturally scared of the recoil of the gun. Mm-hmm. And, so we're bracing against something that isn't happening right now. And that ability to actually hack into the monkey mind, into the elephant, and feel that connection and not be scared, burns this pattern into the brain that unhooks us from fear. And, once it's there, then the rest of your life, you're really just trying to catch that elephant's resistance of fear. And every one of those becomes an opportunity. Then you start running at your fears. And, you're no longer resistance to fear. And the other way around that too is, sabotage is that, I catch a lot of guys, oh no, it's not a snake, it's a stick. And it's like, really? And maybe it's not a stick. Maybe that is a snake. I don't think you need to buy a helicopter.
Right.
And that was earlier this week, a guy getting ready to buy a helicopter, and it's like, no, you don't need it. And so that ability to catch, if you're resistant one way, you're impulsively going the other way. And so catching your impulses either towards or away is what, the real gift of this meditation is. It'll change your life. But the most important part of it is not doing, meditating in the morning will help the day. Keeping a meditation practice will change every area of your life. The goal is to keep it. You make a very small change and keep it. And, then catching the resistance to keeping these small changes is burning that pattern in the brain over and over and over, that you're no longer letting fear run your life.
So when you talk about the recoil in the example of long range shooting, and you talk about the people being fearful of the recoil of the rifle, I mean, shouldn't you though prepare your body for the recoil of the rifle? I mean, how does preparation balance, I guess, with being present?
Great. So, yeah, there is no recoil in the present.
Okay. Yeah.
And how the elephant actually prepares for an impact is to go limp. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a car accident, right before the impact of the other car hitting you, literally your body will go limp. And that is a self-protective mechanism that keeps it from getting hurt. The split between the monkeys and the elephant, and that's the elephant, or the limbic cluster, and the reptilian brain is a real-time operating machine. And, as long as that pattern is not being matched by the monkey mind, or the time machine above our nose, you can go limp. And laying prone completely flat with a very large rifle shooting out to 1,000 yards, when the gun goes off and your body is limp, you don't feel it. I mean, there is no brace to it. Literally, the energy is transferred directly through your entire body and into the ground. If you're braced against it, you will get bruised because you're actually pushing against, something that isn't happening right now. And so it's once you logically understand that, and I talk about the logical container in the book quite a bit, that this rational, logical, what I'm doing right now is not shooting a gun. What I'm doing right now is hyper focusing on this target 1,000 miles away, reading the wind, pushing into the rifle very softly. But I'm not braced. That's all I'm doing, all I'm doing, all I'm doing. And then all I'm doing now is just gently increasing the tension on the trigger. That's all I'm doing right now, right now, right now, right now, right now. And then all of a sudden the gun goes bang. And I've got, brand new shooters shooting 5 for 5 at 1,000 yards on a, very small target. I say it in the book, and I can get a brand new woman shooter to outshoot any Navy SEAL because there's no ego. They just don't know that there's no expectancy. And they just rock it. Oh, that was great. That was so easy. I got these Navy SEALs going up behind them like, how the hell did you do that? Mm-hmm. But their expectancy is it's hard and they're over efforting. Where these women, if you just, and this is another thing that I teach in the book about optimization, you build a process, and the shooting is based on the practice of Kudo, which is a Zen archery, to where there's just a very simple series of steps that you just are following. And that's what I'm doing over and over and over, is just following these simple procedures. And if you follow the simple procedure, you get success. And then the takeaways of that, you build a simple procedure for walking through your door and saying hi to your wife, or returning emails, or feeding the dogs, or, you just chopping wood, or just carrying water, as they say in Zen. But that's what I'm doing right now, is just following this process. And the guys I work with usually 2x or 3x their incomes within a year or two, because they're just building a simple process for what makes them money. And then once they get that simple process and that's what they're doing, and their mind drifts off and they're chasing a squirrel for a second, they let that go and they just come back to the process. And then your life starts to come into balance. We get bored, and then you start another company. You just keep blowing your life up. And then you just build another process, and you build another process, and you build another process. And life is, as a driven person, you can start to optimize every area of your life. You optimize you build a process for exercise, you build a process for your diet, you build a process for saving money, build a process for sleep and eating and, friends. And then you just wind up with this, unbelievable life.
All right. Well, man, it's that's a great place to end it. I think it's funny. I have these kettlebells here, and the process I have for working out it's interesting, is greasing the groove. Basically, every time I walk down the basement, I pick up the kettlebells and I do like 10 kettlebell cleans, for example. And I don't even think about it. I just walk down, I do them. So I've probably done 15 sets of kettlebell cleans today. But in that for me at this point in my development, I guess, is those are the moments when I'm the most present. There's nothing else. It's just those stupid, spheres of iron that I'm trying to, and I know what I need to do over and over and over and over again. Right. And I've been thinking, like, before reading your book, how do I take that? How do I take that and apply it? Because there's something that works here, but I don't know. I wasn't able to put my fingers, like my arms, around what it was that was working there. You know what I mean? So, so I love your book is a game changer. So is this conversation. As you were talking, especially about the concept of maybe. I felt like I don't know what I felt, but it was, it wasn't good or bad. It was maybe, but it was something powerful for sure. So I really appreciate your book, and I appreciate the work you're doing. And I really am thankful for you taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Well, let's do it again. Now, this is fantastic. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Well, hey, for our guests who want to find out more about you, I'll obviously link to the book in the show notes page. But what are some other ways people can find out more about what you're doing?
DrDougBrackmann.com.
All right. Simple and easy. We will include that in the show notes page too. Well, listen, Doug, thanks so much for today. And I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Take care.